the Amud 4, Chaf Aleph Elul, getting closer and closer to Rosh Hashanah. And we are learning the Chaf Tes Amud Beis in Maseches Pesachim, continuing on from the discussion that we left off yesterday. We are going to make sure that we have the link copied here for Chavra to be able to follow along. That we are continuing the conversation. Machlokas the Gemara has recorded. Let's just review quickly. The Machlokas that the Gemara has recorded between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, where Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion, at least potentially, that depending on the Machlokas between Rav and Rav Bar Yaakov, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you cannot derive benefit from chametz that is in existence in the world at all after Pesach, or that you cannot derive benefit from chametz that is owned by a Jew during Pesach, and Rabbi Shimon, who is of the opinion that you need to that chametz that is owned by a Jew or a non-Jew, you can derive benefit even during Pesach, even though there is an Isur Achila. And the Gemara had discussed this with regards to the conversation, making the suggestion that at the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, that Hadar Bei Rav Bar Yaakov Mehahi, that Rav Bar Yaakov had retracted his opinion with regards to his view of Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya. And we're just going to review this very quickly. The Tanya ha'ochel chametz shel hektish b'ma'id mal. A person that eats chametz of hektish has violated the Isser of Me'ilah. And there are some that say that he hasn't violated Me'ilah. So what exactly is this discussion here? Option number one is man yesh amr. Who's the yesh amr? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi Chuni ben Akanya. This is the opinion of Rabbi Chuni ben Akanya. The Tanya Rabbi Chuni ben Akanya haya oises Yom Kippurim k'Shabbos l'Tashlumim. My Shabbos mechayev b'nafshe u'patur min l'Tashlumim. Av Yom Kippurim mechayev b'nafshe u'patur min l'Tashlumim. That if a person were to violate Yom Kippur and therefore be chayev kares and the Tashlumim, that would be the same issue as a person violating Shabbos and being patur from Tashlumim. Either which way, what you see is there are those that say that he was ma'al, and there were those that say that he is not ma'al, meaning does he have to pay back or does he not have to pay back? Either which way, since we are comparing those to chametz and Pesach, we're comparing to violating Yom Kippur, you see that there is at least the theoretical possibility that he should need to pay back. What do you see from that? That it has monetary value. It has monetary value, meaning it's not worthless. If it's not worthless, it means that after Pesach, there would be a value to chametz that is not owned by a Jew. Rav Yosef says, no, the discussion is not about whether or not you are chayev for tashlumim when there is kares involved, but the question is, they want to know, can you get benefit from this for your dogs? Man da amar mal, the one that says you have violated me, then in general you are allowed to redeem kachim to feed to dogs. So man da amar loy mal, one that says you haven't violated me, holds that you cannot be poder your kachim. You can't redeem the kachim to feed that to dogs. But either which way, at least the possibility exists that you could be poder to feed it to a dog, meaning whether or not you have violated me'ilah or you have not violated me'ilah is whether or not that pidyon worked. But do we hold that this has inherent value? Yes. Either which way, we hold that the chametz has inherent value. Rav Bar Yaakov. So how did Rav Bar Yaakov teach this? Rav Bar Yaakov taught this. He taught this the way that Rav Yosef did. Bahaya Lishna. With this version, the Chule Alma ein podim esakot from Achilin Klav. He taught it as a machlokes of whether or not, this is the top of Chav Testament base. He taught this with regards to whether or not you are allowed to feed your kachim to a dog. Meaning, can you be paid, redeem it, and feed it to a dog? And this is the argument. What's the underlying argument? The argument is whether or not something that is a germ moment, something that will kick in a financial obligation, will that be considered to be like monetary value right now? Manda Amar Ma'al, the one that says that you have violated Mi'ila by redeeming this and feeding to your dog, Kasavri holds the thing that causes money, meaning now you have a financial obligation, is Kamamidami, therefore it has value. Umanda Amar, and the one that says Loima'al, that you have not violated Mi'ila Kasavar, he holds Davar Agam Lamaman Lav Kamamidami, something that will cause a financial obligation for money. That thing is not considered to be of monetary value right now. Meaning, and either which way, both of these Tanaim seem to be holding like the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rashi, before we get there, Rashi here points out, Umanda Amar Loi Mal, this is Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Af La'achar Pesach Asu Behana V'chol Sheken BePesach Atzmai Hilkach Lav Mammon Ika the Lisol Loi Chazi V'Lav Garm LeMammon Ika She'im Yifte Loi Yehanim Mimenu Ulenachli Loi Mistavin De'ein Panim Misagat Shem Lachilon Klapin. So how does this work out? Rav Acha bar Yaakov tells us that everybody agrees. The way that he taught us is that everybody agrees that a davar hagarim lemammon, that something that causes mammon, is k'mammon dami. And this is the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Man the Amar loyma, the one that says that you haven't violated me, like Rabbi Yehuda, holds like Rabbi Yehuda that it's forbidden for a Jew even after Pesach, and therefore the chametz of hekdesh doesn't have any value at all, and therefore it's loyma. Umanda Amar, the one that says Ma'al, the one that says that he has violated Me'ilah, holds Ke Rabbi Shimon, that benefiting after Pesach is allowed even for a Jew, and therefore it's a davar hagam l'mammon k'mammon dami. V'har Rav Acha bar Yaakov, but didn't Rav Acha bar Yaakov say who the Amar the Rabbi Yehuda Yalus Sa'or de Achila min Sa'or de Re'iyah? Wasn't he the one that said that you learn Sa'or de Achila from Sa'or de Re'iyah? That he holds that Sa'or de Achila is the same as Sa'or de Re'iyah, and therefore Rashi says v'shel hekdesh af b'Pesach mutar. And here he says Rabbi Yehuda holds that he's not violating the ilah, meaning the sa'ar that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash should not be problematic. Meaning the sa'ar that belongs to a Jew should be problematic, but not the sa'ar that belongs to an Achre. So says the Gemara, the Beis Hamikdash, Elahada be Rav Acha bar Yaakov mehahi. You have to conclude that Rav Acha bar Yaakov retracted his opinion. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi explains as follows: the Chule Alma, everybody agrees, that there's no, that the way to understand this discussion is that everybody agrees that you cannot redeem your kachim to feed to a dog. And the second issue is that a monetary, something that will cause a monetary financial obligation is not considered to have value currently. I mean, there are two issues here. Can you do pidyon, and is a cause for money supposed going to be considered to have value right now? This is not the conversation between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. This is the conversation that was had between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. How so? There, Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, the one that says that you have violated Me'ilah, Rabbi Yossi, he also like Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, that you could get benefit even during Pesach itself. Meaning, during Pesach itself, you would be permitted to get hana'ah from chametz. Man the Amar loy ma'al, and the one that says that you haven't violated Me'ilah Rabbanan, he holds like the opinion of the Rabbanan, meaning the opinion of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. The chametz on Pesach does not get. There's no possibility of the Rabbin benefit from it, and therefore it has no value. And therefore, you can still maintain that Rav Acha bar Yaakov was not chazor on his shita, and that comes out la halacha that what we're going to say is that the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is that there is an isur of hana'ah of chametz on Pesach, and there is no isur of hana'ah me'ikra din. Would seem that would be the machlokas, maybe midarash midarabanan after Pesach. But on Pesach itself, everybody would agree that there is an isur. The Rabbanan would agree that there is an isur of hana of chametz on Pesach. Okay. Now we're going to get into the discussion of the isur of chametz that fell into other things, and this is every balabas's worst nightmare, and certainly every caterer and every chef's worst nightmare. The Gemara opens the discussion with Amar Rav. Rav, halfway down the page, more or less, a little less. Amar Rav. Rav tells us chametz bismane. Chametz during its time, meaning during the time of Isser on Pesach itself, bein b'mina, bein shaloi b'mina, whether it is mixed in with its own type, meaning it's mixed in with other with matzah, that would be mina, shaloi b'mina, or with any other thing, chicken soup. Bein bismane, bein shaloi bismane, aser. It's going to be aser. Shaloi bismane, if it is not during that time, b'minai aser, if it is with its own species, with its own kind, aser. Shaloi b'minai, and if it is with something else other than its own species, it is going to be mutter. But my asking, what are we dealing with here? What's the discussion? If we are talking about a question of noisin tam, noisin tam means that that when one item is dropped into another item and it maintains flavor, it creates flavor of itself in the other item, meaning you dropped a little bit of milk into the cholent. So the question is b'neisin tam. So if it's enough milk that you can taste it, that would be awesome. Shaloi bismanu. So says Gemara, if we're talking about a question of b'neisin tam, so shaloi bismanai, shaloi b'minai mutter, then it should be entirely mutter if it was shaloi bismanai, outside of Pesach, shaloi b'minai, and it's something that it wasn't its own type, it should be mutter. So he says hayav taima, but it still imparts flavor, meaning we should still say that it would be aser, meaning who cares about the time and whether or not it's shaloi b'minai. We should say whether or not it is going to be giving flavor. That should be the determining factor. So says the Gemara. Now, what is the conversation here? We're talking about a tiny drop of chametz that is on Pesach. Whether it falls into its own kind or it doesn't fall into its own kind, it is going to be aser. A masha of chametz is aser on Pesach. 1 crumb of chametz is going to aser everything. And says the Gemara, Rav Latame, and this is Rav being consistent with his mahalach in general. The Rav Shmuel, the Amar Tavayu, but Rav and Shmuel hold kol isurim shevatayra, all of the isurim of the Torah, b'minoi b'mashu, if it is mixed in with its own kind, b'mashu, even a tiny drop of it, because its flavor is irrelevant. B'minoi, it's going to be also b'mashu. You put a tiny drop of treif milk in milk, then it's going to be aser. The whole milk, the whole thing is going to be aser. Shaloi b'mina, if it's not, if it's on top, if it's milk into meat, b'neisin tam, then it requires imparting flavor in order to aser it. That's Rav and Shmuel both hold like this, that there's a difference between b'mina and shaloi b'mina. And then Rav Gaza, Rav holds that there is a gzeira of chametz b'mina, chametz bismana, the chametz during its time, shaloi b'mina, even if it is not in its own kind, ata b'mina, because maybe you'll accidentally come to violate chametz, that 1 crumb fell into something that is not its kind. You'll end up violating chametz, falling into something that is its kind, which is not going to be bottled ever, and therefore we're going to ask chametz b'mashu no matter what, all the time. If it's not during the time of Isur, b'minai, in its own kind, Asr. It's going to be Asr, Rabbi Yehuda, because this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, who told us that Chametz after Pesach is Asr, and therefore, if it's b'minai, If it's with its own kind, it's going to be aser. That's because of the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And if it is not in its own kind, mutter. It's going to be mutter because we're not going to be. It's also according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, but we're not going to be. We're not going to make that gezerah. Mutter. Because if it's not during the time of Isser, if it is mixed with something else, we have a concern of to say the concern of if it's not in the time of Isser and it is not mixed with its own kind, kule hai loigazrim. We're not going to go so far as to make such a gzera. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says chametz bismanai, chametz in its time, bismanai, chametz bismanai, b'minai, if it is in its own kind, aser. That's going to be an iser. Shaloi b'minai, if it's not with its own kind, mutter, that's going to be permissible. Shaloi bismanai, but if it is after Pesach, bein b'minai, bein shaloi b'minai, whether it's with its kind or it's not with its kind, it's going to be mutter. It's going to be mutter and ganzen. Why? Because chametz after Pesach is mutter, the way that he's learning it. Let's see. It says the Gemara, chametz bismanai, chametz during Pesach, b'minai aser. If it's mixed with its own stuff, it's going to be aser. And Shmuel letame, and Shmuel is also consistent with his rationale. The Rav and Shmuel, the Amr Tavai, both Rav and Shmuel hold kol isurim shebatar b'minai asurim b'mashu, that all isurim in the Torah, if it is mixed with its own kind, it is going to be aser, even with a tiny drop. Shaloi b'minai, if it's mixed with something that's not its top, b'nais and tam, then the definition is not b'mashu, it is b'nais and tam, which is put out b'nais and tam means b'shishim. It could be batal b'shishim. Shaloi b'minam, but if it's mixed with something that is not its top, atu minan loy gazer. We are not concerned on Pesach, even on Pesach itself, that if a tiny drop falls into something that's shaloi b'minam, you're going to say, "Ooh, tiny drops that fell into its own kind is also going to be mutter." So we don't make that gezerah. Shaloi b'zman. I mean, that's even on Pesach. Shaloi b'zman, if it's outside of Pesach, meaning after Pesach, bein minam bein shaloi b'minam, whether it fell into its own kind or it's not its own kind, mutar. It's going to be mutar. Rabbi Shimon, because he holds like the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon holds that meikar din de'araisa chametz is mutar after Pesach, meaning even chametz that was in existence and was owned by a Jew after Pesach is mutar mide'araisa. And therefore, since it's mutar, even if it's b'minai, it's not going to be aser because there's no iser here. The only isser would be it's an isser mashu if it falls into its if it's own kind, but that's only if the thing that fell in was aser to start with. According to Rabbi Shimon, it is not aser to start with. So we have a machlokes Rabbi Shmuel whether or not chametz shaloi b'minai is aser on Pesach, and we have a machlokes whether chametz even b'minai is aser after Pesach. According to Rabbi Yochanan, we have third opinion. Chametz bismanai, chametz during its time period, bein b'minai, bein shaloi b'minai, whether it is on Pesach or it is chametz bismanai, chametz on Pesach, whether it is mixed with its own top or not. That's bein b'minai, bein shaloi b'minai, aser b'nais in tam. The issue is only going to be an issue of b'nais in tam. Shaloi b'zmanai, if it is after Pesach, bein b'minam, bein shaloi b'minam, whether it is mixed with its own stuff or not, mutter. It's going to be mutter completely. Chametz b'zmanai, the chametz during its time on Pesach, bein b'minai, bein shaloi b'minai, whether it is mixed with its own top or it's not mixed with its own top, b'nais in tam. That why is that only b'nais in tam and it's not b'mashahu? Because, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan is consistent with his rationale. The Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish Tamar Tavayu, because Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish disagreed with Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel, who lived in Babel, and Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish lived in Eretz Yisrael. They hold kol yisurim shevatari bein b'minam bein shaloi b'minam. All the yisurim in the Torah, whether they are mixed with their own stuff or not with their own stuff, b'nois in tam. The thing that is going to be the determining factor is whether or not it's b'nois in tam. Now, Nice and tam is a very difficult thing to imagine with regards to something that is b'minai. How could you say that there's a nice and tam? You're not going to know what the tam is. Shaloi b'zmanai. We'll have to explain that. Shaloi b'zmanai, if it is not in its right time, bein b'minai. If it's after Pesach, bein b'minai, bein shaloi b'minai mutarim. It's mutar ke Rabbi Shimon, like the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And says the Gemara, going on to Daf Lamed, just the top line here. Amar Rava says, Hilchasa, the halach is chametz bizmane, chametz during its time. Bein, on Pesach, bein b'mina, bein shaloi b'mina, whether it is its own type or it is not its own type. Also b'mashu, it's going to be also with even one drop. Karav, that is the opinion of Rav. Shaloi bizmana, if it is not in its time, meaning it's after Pesach, bein b'minai, bein shaloi b'minai, whether it is its own, whether it is falling into its own type or it's not in its own type, mutar, it is mutar ke Rabbi Shimon. This is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And then the Gemara is going to challenge: did Rava really hold like this? To be continued tomorrow. Everybody should have a beautiful evening, a Shavuot of Mavarach. And we will see you tomorrow morning.